Gunfire shredded the Afghan night as the Condor team scrambled for cover in the ravine. The rapid staccato of enemy weapons echoed through the mountains of Baghlan province, each burst narrowing the Special Forces team's chances of survival. "We're dead. We're fucking dead." Captain James Shepard's voice cracked through the radio static as Taliban rounds tore through the scrub above Echo Team's position. 6 elite operators pressed into the shallow depression of rocky earth surrounded by fighters who knew every stone and shadow of these mountains. 800 meters away in the command center of Forward Operating Base Eagle Rock, a mousy logistics clerk named Margaret Reynolds sat frozen at her station. Through the tactical display, she watched the chaos unfold. Blue dots representing Condor Team clustered in a narrow ravine, while red markers multiplied around them like a virus. The other operators frantically tried to reach air support, but the storm had grounded everything within a 100-mile radius. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for a locked drawer beneath her desk, a drawer she'd sworn never to open again. Her breathing slowed. Her trembling stopped. In 15 minutes, everything would change. The terrified clerk they all ignored was about to remind the world why some legends never truly die. The command center at Forward Operating Base Eagle Rock hummed with controlled panic. 6 operators worked their stations, calling every available asset within range. Nothing. The storm system had rolled in fast-grounding helicopters and making drone coverage impossible. "Eagle's Nest, this is Condor 7. Shepard's voice came through again, strained against background gunfire. "We need immediate air support. Position compromised. Heavy contact." "Condor 7, this is Eagle's Nest," the senior communications officer replied. "All air assets grounded due to weather. ETA unknown for support." Shepard's bitter laugh cut through the static. "Unknown. We'll be meet in 20 minutes." Margaret Reynolds had worked logistics at Eagle Rock for 8 months. Every morning she arrived at 05:30, made coffee for the operations staff, and spent 12 hours managing supply requests and inventory databases. The operators called her Mouse, partly for her quiet demeanor, partly for how she seemed to shrink into corners whenever the door kickers walked by. At 28, she was forgettable in every way that mattered in a combat zone: brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, standard-issue ACUs that hung loose on her small frame, and eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze. Tonight was different. As the radio chatter grew more desperate, Margaret's fingers moved to the locked drawer she'd installed herself on her first day. The other operators didn't notice. They were too focused on their screens, on the impossible math of 30 Taliban fighters versus 6 special operators with limited ammunition and no air support. "Condor 7, this is Eagle's Nest." The senior operator tried again. "We're working on options. Can you hold position?" "Negative." Shepard's voice came back strained. "They've got us pinned from 3 sides. RPGs incoming." An explosion rattled through the speakers, followed by screaming and more gunfire. Margaret's hand paused on the drawer handle. 3 years. 3 years she'd kept her promise to disappear, to become nobody, to let the world believe that particular ghost had been laid to rest. But promises meant nothing when good men were about to die. She pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a rifle case, unlike anything in the standard armory. Black polymer with biometric locks, unmarked except for a small etching that looked like a coiled cobra. Beneath it, folded with military precision, was a ghillie suit that had been modified in ways no manual taught. The fabric wasn't just camouflage. It was art crafted by someone who understood that in the jungle, the difference between invisible and dead was measured in millimeters. Colonel Frank Harrison walked into the command center just as Margaret lifted the case onto her desk. He was a tall man, weathered by 30 years of service, with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Except this. He stopped mid-stride coffee mug, frozen halfway to his lips. Their eyes met across the room. In that look was 3 years of shared secrets, of careful misdirection, of a fiction maintained for reasons that went higher than either of them could touch. Harrison's expression shifted through surprise, concern, and finally grim acceptance. He gave the slightest nod. "I'll handle the questions," he said quietly. "You handle the problem." Margaret was already moving. She slung the rifle case over her shoulder and grabbed the ghillie suit, heading for the door that led to the motor pool. As she passed, one of the younger operators glanced up from his screen. "Where's Mouse going with that gear?" Harrison's voice was flat. "Getting some air. storms making everyone twitchy. The operator had already turned back to his screen, missing the small tattoo that peeked out from under Margaret's rolled sleeve as she pushed through the door. A cobra coiled and ready to strike with eyes that seemed to follow the viewer. The kind of ink that required special clearance to get from artists who didn't advertise and didn't ask questions. Outside, the Afghan night was thick with humidity and the promise of vigilance. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the compound into a maze of mud and shadows. Margaret moved through it like she'd been born to darkness, her movements economical and precise. She'd covered 200 meters before anyone thought to wonder why the quiet logistics clerk knew exactly where the blind spots in the base's camera coverage were. The perimeter fence loomed ahead. Beyond it, the mountainside stretched away into darkness. Margaret paused at the fence line, assembling her rifle with movements so practiced they were meditation. Her fingers connected each component with surgical precision. The specialized long-range optics system with military-grade thermal imaging technology originally developed for satellite surveillance, but adapted for extreme combat conditions. The advanced atmospheric sensors could penetrate triple canopy foliage and calculate bullet drift through humid air with a precision that civilian equipment could never achieve. Each component clicked into place with the satisfying precision of Swiss clockwork. Condor 7. This is Eagle's Nest. Still working on those options. ETA unknown. Shepard's response was more gunfire than words. We don't have unknown. They're moving to flank. Where's our fucking help? Margaret finished the assembly and slipped on the ghillie suit. The fabric was heavier than it looked, weighted with local vegetation she'd been collecting and treating for months, telling anyone who asked it was for a hobby project. Now that vegetation would help her disappear into the mountainside like smoke into air. She keyed her radio, switching to the tactical frequency. Her voice, when it came, was different than the mouse everyone knew. Lower, steadier, with an edge that could cut glass. Condor Team, new call sign on net. Stand by for fire support. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the gunfire seemed to pause as 6 Special Forces operators tried to process what they just heard. A woman's voice, calm as a frozen lake, promising fire support when none existed. Shepard was the first to recover, his response dripping with contempt. Great. Which secretary found a radio lady? Get off this frick. This is a tactical channel for operators. Hostile sniper, northwest tree line, 3rd branch, approximately 40 meters from your position. Margaret interrupted, her voice carrying that same unsettling calm. Duck in 3, 2, 1. The crack of her rifle split the night like thunder. Through the radio, she heard the meaty thud of impact, followed by branches breaking as a body crashed through the foliage. The Taliban sniper landed 5 feet from Shepard's position. A neat hole centered in his forehead. The tactical channel went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Margaret was already moving, sliding through the undergrowth like water through rocks. The rain helped masking sound and washing away tracks. She'd covered 50 meters in under a minute, finding the elevated position she'd scouted months ago during one of her walks that everyone assumed were just mouse being mouse. Condor 7, she said, settling into position. Confirmed visual on the body. Lieutenant Carter's voice came through, shaky with disbelief. Confirmed. Hostile down. Who is this? Someone who's going to get you home. Now listen carefully. You have 15 hostiles approaching from the north, spread in a standard flanking pattern. Team leader carrying the radio pack. 3rd from the left. On my mark, suppress the ravine entrance. Shepard found his voice again, but the contempt had been replaced by confusion. How can you see that we've got night vision and can't see shit through this weather? Margaret ignored the question. She had work to do. Through her scope, the mountainside revealed its secrets in gradients of heat. The Taliban fighters moved well, she'd give them that. Disciplined spacing, overlapping fields of fire, using the terrain like men who'd grown up in these mountains. But discipline meant patterns, and patterns meant prediction. Mark, she said. Condor Team opened up with suppressing fire, forcing the flanking element to take cover. In that moment of transition, when movement stopped and positions were revealed, Margaret went to work. 6 shots in 8 seconds. 6 heat signatures cooling in the rain. The surviving Taliban fighters scrambled for cover. Their careful approach dissolved into chaos. Jesus Christ, someone whispered over the radio. Margaret thought it might have been Shepard, but she was already repositioning. The thing about being dead was that it freed you from certain limitations. Margaret Reynolds, the logistics clerk, had to follow rules, nobody had to accept the daily indignities of being invisible. But the woman in the ghillie suit, the one whose file had been burned 3 years ago in a basement in Langley, she had no such constraints. She was a ghost, and ghosts could do impossible things. New contact, southwest, she reported idoscope. Counting 30 plus, they're bringing RPGs. 30, Shepard's voice cracked. We can't hold against 30. You won't have to. Maintain your position and keep your heads down. This is about to get loud. Through her thermal scope, Margaret studied the approaching force. These weren't mountain thugs with AKs. The way they moved, the way they held their weapons, the hand signals she caught glimpses of. This was a trained unit. Somewhere in their ranks would be their leader, and somewhere behind him would be their best shooter. Find them, remove them, and the rest would crumble. There, heat signature holding back and directing others, forward radio antenna extending from his pack. The shot would be difficult. 1,400 meters through driving rain with cross winds gusting to 30 knots. The kind of shot that existed in training manuals as theoretically possible but rarely attempted in actual combat. Margaret began her breathing sequence, the one that had been drilled into her so long ago it was autonomic. In through the nose, hold out through the mouth. Her heart rate dropped. 45 beats per minute. 40. 38. At 35, the world narrowed to the scope, the target, and the space between. The rifle spoke. 1,400 meters away, the Taliban leader's head snapped back. His men scattered like roaches when the lights come on, discipline shattered by the impossible reality that someone somewhere in the darkness could reach out and touch them at will. Target down, Margaret reported. They're reconsidering their life choices. This time it was definitely Shepard who laughed, a sound caught between hysteria and awe. Who the fuck are you? Someone who needs you to move in 30 seconds. Can you make it to the rocks 20 meters northeast? The ones that look like a broken tooth. That's open ground, Carter protested. Not for long. Margaret slithered backwards from her position, vanishing into the undergrowth. She had their attention now, every Taliban fighter looking up at the ridgelines, wondering which shadow hid death. Time to use that fear. She'd made it 200 meters when her earpiece crackled with a new voice. Older, calmer, with the kind of accent that had suggested European training. I know you're listening, shooter, the voice said. This is Omar Al-Fadil. Perhaps you've heard of me. Margaret's blood chilled. Al-Fadil, the hunter. Former Iraqi Special Forces trained at Fort Benning before he went mercenary. His file had crossed her desk once, back when she had a desk that mattered. 32 confirmed kills. Methodology suggested American training with Russian influences. If he was here, this wasn't random. Someone had paid serious money to take out Condor Team. I've heard of a lot of people, she replied, continuing to move. Most of them are dead. His laugh was rich, genuine. Ah, a woman. How delightful. Tell me, where did you learn to shoot? That was beautiful work on Ahmadi. Very clean. Finishing school, we had a very comprehensive curriculum. Indeed, I think perhaps we attended similar schools. Tell me, do they still teach the walking fire technique at Benning, or have you learned that somewhere more exclusive? Margaret's jaw tightened. He was fishing, but he was fishing in the right pond. She keyed her mic to the Condor Team frequency. Move now, northeast to the rocks. Through her scope, she watched the special operators break cover, bounding in pairs, while the others covered. Professional, smooth, trained, but exposed for 15 seconds of open ground. More than enough time for a good shooter. The muzzle flash came from the east, exactly where she'd expected. Margaret was already squeezing her trigger, sending her round to intercept. Not the shooter, the bullet. A 1 in a million shot that existed more in theory than practice, deflecting one round with another. Her bullet caught his 2 feet from Carter's head, both rounds spinning off into the darkness. Madre de Dios, Al-Fadil breathed over the radio. You didn't just... That's impossible. Condor Team, hold position, Margaret ordered, already moving again. The game had changed. Al-Fadil wasn't just good. He was apex predator good. The kind of shooter who could make her work for it. Tell me your name, Al-Fadil said. Professional courtesy. I am Omar Al-Fadil, formerly of the Iraqi Special Operations Forces. And you? Margaret considered lying, but lies were for people who planned to live through their secrets. Once upon a time, they called me Cobra. The silence that followed was profound. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. When Alpha Deal spoke again, his voice had lost its playful edge. No, Cobra died in Operation Sandstorm. Kandahar 3 years ago, the CIA confirmed it. The CIA confirms a lot of things, doesn't make them true. Prove it. The real Cobra had a signature. Show me. Margaret smiled grimly. He wanted a demonstration. Fine. Through her scope, she identified 5 targets spread across a 300-meter arc. In training, they'd called it the Cobra Strike. 5 shots in 5 seconds each from a different firing position, creating the illusion of multiple shooters. It required perfect muscle memory, absolute spatial awareness, and the kind of reflexes that came from genetics as much as training. She took a breath, held it, and became the weapon. The first shot came from her primary position, catching a Taliban soldier trying to advance on Condor Team's left flank. Before the brass hit the ground, Margaret was moving sliding 8 meters through mud and undergrowth to her second point. Shot 2 dropped a machine gunner setting up on the ridge. She rolled, came up in a crouch, acquired target 3, another flanker, and put him down before his partner realized what was happening. 10-meter sprint to position 4 sliding behind a fallen log just as return fire sparked where she'd been. Shot 4 took the partner, center mass. Without pausing, she pivoted. 45 degrees found the 5th target trying to radio for help and ended his transmission permanently. 5 shots, 5 kills, 5 seconds. The mountainside fell silent except for the rain and the ragged breathing of terrified men. Dios mío. Alpha Deal's voice was reverent. It really is you, La Cobra herself. But how I saw the after-action reports. Your entire unit was killed in Kandahar. The building collapsed. Reports can be edited. Margaret cut him off, already displacing to her next position. Bodies can be misidentified. Sometimes people need to die so they can do what needs to be done without congressional oversight getting in the way. Through her scope, she caught movement. Alpha Deal was repositioning too, using the conversation to mask his approach. Smart, but she'd been playing this game longer. The CIA killed you to make you a better weapon, he said, understanding creeping into his voice. Black operations, wet work, the kind of missions that don't exist. Something like that. Margaret found him in her thermal, a ghost of heat moving through the rocks 300 meters from Condor Team's position. He was good using the terrain like a native, but the rain had been falling long enough to cool the landscape. His body heat stood out like a beacon. Professional to professional, Alpha Deal said. I'm curious, how many operations? How many targets? Enough to know this ends one of 2 ways. You walk away now or you don't walk away at all. His laugh was sad. You know I can't do that. They paid me $5 million American dollars to ensure these special operators don't make it home. My reputation, your reputation won't matter if you're dead. True, but consider this. There are 50 more fighters moving up from the south. My best men. Even you can't stop them all. Margaret checked her tactical display. He wasn't bluffing. Heat signatures were multiplying at the valley's southern entrance. A full platoon with heavy weapons moving in disciplined formation. Condor Team had 10 minutes, maybe less. She reached into a pocket on her combat vest and removed a small case containing specialized combat medications, military-grade nerve stabilizers, and focus-enhancing compounds designed for special operations snipers in prolonged engagements. The prescription neurological enhancers eliminated hand tremors and enhanced visual acuity beyond normal human limits in high-stress situations. The bitter taste was familiar, grounding a reminder of operations in places that didn't exist against targets who were never there. Condor 7, she radioed. Large force approaching from the south. We need to thin them out before they get in range. Copy, Shepard responded. What's the plan? The plan is you keep your heads down and let me work. She switched channels. Alpha Deal, last chance, professional courtesy. I appreciate the offer, Cobra, but we both know how this dance ends. Yes, Margaret said softly. We do. She found him in the scope 400 meters out, partially concealed behind a cluster of rocks. A difficult shot, but not impossible. He'd be expecting her to take it would move the moment she fired. So she wouldn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she put a round through the rock 6 inches above his head. Alpha Deal reacted instantly, dropping and rolling left, directly into the path of her second shot. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. His rifle fell clattering across the stones, but he was still alive, still moving, reaching for a sidearm with his good hand. Margaret's third shot took the pistol from his grip along with two fingers. He fell back against the rocks, cradling his ruined hand. "Wait," his voice came through the radio thick with pain. "You had the kill shot. Because you're a professional, not a Taliban thug. And because dead men can't deliver messages. Tell whoever hired you that Condor Team is under my protection. Anyone who comes after them will find me waiting. They'll keep coming. They have unlimited resources. And I have unlimited patience, your choice, Omar. Bleed out in these mountains or live to shoot another day. But not today. Not these men." A long pause, then "I'll need a tourniquet. Northeast 20 meters from your position. There's a medical cache hidden under the rocks that look like a skull. I put it there 8 months ago. You've been here that long. I've been everywhere that long. Goodbye, Omar. Don't make me kill you twice." She cut the connection and turned her attention to the approaching force. 50 men heavily armed, confident in their numbers. They'd spread into a classic assault formation. 2 prongs to pin Condor Team, while a third circled for the killing blow. Textbook tactics that would work against most opponents. Margaret wasn't most opponents. She began with their communications, putting precision shots through every visible radio antenna. Without coordination, 50 men became 5 groups of 10 each, assuming the others were still in contact. Then she went for the heavy weapons, the RPG carriers first, then the machine gun teams. Each shot placed to wound, not kill. Wounded men screamed, screaming men destroyed morale. "Jesus Christ," Shepard whispered over the radio. "She's taking them apart." "Sir," Carter's voice was odd. "The shot patterns. I've seen these before. Operation Sandstorm, the classified footage. That's..." Shepard cut him off. "She's dead. The whole unit died in Kandahar." "Dead people make the best ghosts, Captain." Margaret's voice was steady despite the exhaustion creeping into her muscles. 3 years of playing mouse had made her soft. The enhanced focus drugs could only do so much. "Your extraction window is opening. North-northeast following the ravine. Move now while they're confused." "Who are you, EO?" Shepard demanded. Really, who the fuck are you?" Margaret put a round through another radio operator before answering. 3 years ago, the CIA needed someone who could operate in places where American soldiers couldn't go. Someone who could eliminate threats without leaving fingerprints. They found 12 of us, all women, all with unique skill sets. They called us the Mamba Unit. She displaced again muscles, remembering paths her mind had mapped months ago. The Taliban fighters were starting to panic now, firing blindly into the mountains. Their muzzle flashes gave away positions, made them easy targets. The mission in Kandahar was supposed to be simple. She continued, squeezing off another shot. Eliminate a terrorist cell planning attacks on American soil. But it was a trap. They knew we were coming. My unit was ambushed. The building rigged to collapse. 11 good women died that day. But not you. Shepard's voice had lost all its earlier contempt. Not me. I was providing overwatch. Saw it happen. Couldn't stop it. The CIA decided it was cleaner to report me dead too. Less questions that way. They gave me a new identity, new mission parameters. Become nobody. Go nowhere. Be everywhere. The remaining Taliban fighters were in full retreat now, dragging wounded comrades, abandoning weapons and equipment. Margaret let them go. The message would spread. These mountains were protected by something that killed from the darkness. Fear was more effective than bullets. Cobra, Shepard said slowly, like he was tasting the word. Holy shit, you're really her, the ghost sniper. We thought it was just stories. Stories are all that's left of us, Captain. Now move, your ride will be here in 5 minutes. How do you... The distant thrum of rotors answered his question. Somehow, despite the weather, despite the grounding orders, helicopters were inbound. Margaret smiled grimly. Colonel Harrison had called in favors. Good man. She watched through her scope as Condor Team moved out professional, even in retreat. They'd make it. The mission was complete. Time for her to disappear back into the shadows. Freeze, Cobra. The voice came from directly behind her. Margaret froze, calculating angles and distances. 3 meters elevated position, no cover between them. She'd been so focused on the valley she'd missed the approach. Hands where I can see them, rifle on the ground. Slowly she complied, setting the rifle aside and raising her hands. In her peripheral vision, she caught black tactical gear, suppressed weapons, the kind of equipment that didn't show up in regular Army inventory. Turn around, slowly. Margaret turned to face 3 men in unmarked uniforms. CIA Security Division, the ones who cleaned up messes and handled personnel issues that couldn't go through normal channels. The leader was young, late 20s, with the kind of face that had never known real hardship. "Ma'am, we're here to bring you in. Langley has questions about your activities." "I'm sure they do." Margaret kept her voice calm, hands visible. "Let me guess. Someone noticed the ammunition discrepancies. Or was it the medical supplies I've been requisitioning? You've been operating without authorization for 3 years. That ends tonight." "Does it?" Margaret smiled. "Tell me, Agent, what's your name?" "That's not relevant." "Thompson," she said, reading his micro-expressions. "First name David, number Daniel. Daniel Thompson, recruited out of Penn State, fast-tracked through training because your cyber skills compensated for mediocre fieldwork. This is your first hot extraction, isn't it?" Thompson's grip on his weapon tightened. "How?" "Because I wrote your psychological evaluation back when I had a desk at Langley before I became inconvenient. Tell me, Daniel, do you know why they really sent you after me? You're a rogue asset, a security risk." "I'm a reminder," Margaret corrected, "of operations that went wrong, of agents left behind, of promises broken. They want me gone because every day I exist, it is another day someone might ask uncomfortable questions about Operation Sandstorm." The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. Not just the extraction birds. Margaret could distinguish at least 2 other sets of rotors, heavy ones. Colonel Harrison hadn't just called in favors, he'd mobilized a small army. "Here's what's going to happen," Margaret said. "You're going to report that you found no trace of the rogue asset, that whoever's been operating in this area must have moved on. You're going to do this because the alternative is explaining to your superiors how you lost a 3-man team to a single operator who's supposedly been out of the game for 3 years. You're threatening us. I'm offering you a chance to walk away. Same offer I gave Alpha Deal. Professional courtesy." Lights blazed through the rain as the first helicopter overflew their position. The door gunner had them in sight, M240 trained on the clearing. A voice crackled over loudspeakers. "CIA security team, this is Colonel Harrison, United States Army. You are in violation of operational security protocols. Stand down immediately." Thompson looked up at the circling aircraft, then back at Margaret. "This won't end here. They'll keep sending teams." "Let them. I'll be waiting." She stepped back, melting into the shadows. "Oh, and Daniel, check your sidearm." Thompson's hand flew to his holster, finding it empty. His pistol lay disassembled at his feet, broken down to components in the seconds he'd been distracted by the helicopter. His partners spun weapons raised, but Margaret was already gone. Only her voice remained drifting from the darkness. "Tell Langley that Cobra is dead. She died in Kandahar with her sisters. What's left is just a ghost, and you can't kill what's already dead." 3 months later, Margaret Reynolds sat in her small office at Phobe Eagle Rock, typing supply requisitions and filing inventory reports. Her desk was neat, organized, forgettable. The only decoration was a small challenge coin, its surface worn smooth from handling. A trident on one side, a cobra on the other. Outside, she could hear Condor team preparing for another mission. Shepard had requested this specific FO for their staging area, claiming it had the best logistics support in theater. The real reason was unspoken, but understood. They wanted their guardian angel nearby. A knock on her door interrupted her typing. "Come in." Colonel Harrison entered, closing the door behind him. He looked older than he had 3 months ago, the weight of secrets adding lines to his face. "Any problems with Langley?" Margaret asked without looking up from her screen. "Nothing I couldn't handle." Helps that Condor team's after-action report was very specific about the assistance they received. Hard to disappear someone when 6 Special Forces operators are willing to testify to their existence. "They're good men." "They are." Harrison set a folder on her desk, "which is why I thought you should see this." Margaret opened the folder, finding satellite imagery of a compound in Montana. Armed guards, fortified positions, and in the center, a building that made her blood run cold. She'd seen its twin in Kandahar right before it collapsed on her team. Same architect, Harrison said quietly. Same design. We think it's the same organization that killed my sisters. Margaret's voice was flat. When boys, 2 weeks. Delta team is primary, but they've requested Overwatch support. Specifically, they've requested you. Margaret stared at the images. 3 years of being nobody, of accepting the fiction of her death, of letting the world forget that Cobra had ever existed. 3 years of safety purchased with silence. But safety had never been the point. She reached into her drawer, the same locked drawer that had started everything 3 months ago. Inside, next to the rifle case, lay 11 photos. 11 women who'd trusted her to keep them alive. 11 ghosts who deserved justice. Tell Delta I'll be there, she said, but I go in dark. No records, no oversight, no acknowledgement. Just then an alarm klaxon cut through her words. The base-wide intercom crackled to life. All units, we have troops in contact. Grid reference 77-9er, immediate assistance requested. Margaret was already moving, muscle memory taking over. She grabbed the rifle case and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at Harrison. 12 hours, she said. Have Delta team ready in 12 hours. Where are you going? Margaret smiled. And for just a moment, Harrison saw not the quiet logistics clerk, but the predator she'd always been. Someone needs help. That's what ghosts do, Colonel. We answer when no one else can. She vanished into the Afghan night, leaving Harrison alone with the photos of 11 dead women and the satellite images of a building that might hold answers. Outside, the mountains waited dark and full of secrets. Some legends never die. They just wait for the next call in the darkness, the next impossible shot, the next chance to balance the scales. And in the shadows between life and death, between fiction and truth, Cobra endured. After all, someone had to watch over the living, especially when the living didn't know they were being watched. The storm was coming back. Lightning illuminated the mountains in stark relief. Somewhere out there, soldiers were fighting for their lives, praying for a miracle they didn't know was already moving through the darkness toward them. Margaret Reynolds, the mouse, the nobody, the forgotten clerk, ceased to exist the moment she stepped into the shadows. What emerged was something else entirely, something that had been waiting 3 years for a reason to exist again. In the distance, gunfire echoed through the valley like thunder rolling between the mountains. A new battle, a new crisis, a new chance to prove that sometimes the best protection comes from the shadows no one thinks to check. The muzzle flashes painted the low-hanging clouds in brief strokes of orange and red. Another desperate fight unfolding in the endless war. Margaret paused at the mountain's edge, rain streaming down her painted face, the weight of the rifle familiar as an old friend against her shoulder. Some ghosts, she whispered to the darkness that had become her home, her voice barely audible above the storm, refused to stay buried. The mountains swallowed her, whole shadows closing behind her like a curtain falling on a stage. And the legend lived on. The storm passed, but the memory of gunfire lingered in the mountains around Eagle Rock. 3 weeks after the rescue of Condor team, whispers circulated through the base. Operators spoke in hushed tones about the ghost sniper, the woman who had appeared from nowhere to deliver impossible salvation. Some said it was special forces from another coalition country. Others claimed it was a CIA black team testing new technology. The younger soldiers thought it was all exaggerated combat stories. Only 6 men knew the truth. 6 men who now looked at the small, mousy logistics clerk with new eyes. Margaret Reynolds noticed the change immediately. Captain Shepard no longer barked orders when she delivered the supplies to his team. Lieutenant Carter actually smiled when passing her in the mess hall. The rest of Condor team maintained a respectful distance, but their posture changed in her presence. Subtle shifts in body language that anyone with her training would recognize. They stood straighter, hands stayed visible. They treated her like what she was, the most dangerous person on base. She hated it. The entire point of becoming Margaret Reynolds had been anonymity. The nondescript clerk was supposed to be invisible, forgettable, a ghost hiding in plain sight. But now there were eyes on her, watching, evaluating, and not just from Condor team. Colonel Harrison had warned her. After the incident with the CIA security team, Langley would be watching more closely. They wouldn't send another extraction team so quickly, not with Harrison providing protection and Condor team ready to testify about the mysterious guardian angel who'd saved them. But they would be watching, waiting for her to make a mistake, to confirm what they already suspected. That cobra wasn't as dead as they'd hoped. The radio crackled beside Margaret's bed at 0300. Mouse, secure channel 6. She was already awake. 3 years of playing dead hadn't dulled her instincts. The slightest sound still pulled her from sleep with a hand halfway to the weapon hidden beneath her mattress. She lifted the encrypted radio. Channel secure. My office, 20 minutes. Harrison's voice was flat professional, but she caught the undertone. Something had changed. Copy. She dressed quickly in standard ACUs, moving with the silent efficiency that had once been as natural as breathing. The night air was cold as she crossed the compound, Afghan winter settling into the mountains. Few personnel were moving at this hour. A patrol returning from the perimeter, 2 mechanics working on a Humvee under floodlights, a lone soldier smoking by the communications building. Margaret tracked them all, calculating distances, angles, threat assessments. Old habits. Harrison's office was in the administrative section, a prefabricated building indistinguishable from a dozen others. No light showed around his door, but she knew he was waiting. She knocked once entered without waiting for a response. The room was dark except for a single desk lamp. Harrison sat behind his desk, silver hair catching the light, face in shadow. A folder lay closed before him. Close the door. She did, then stood at parade rest. The formality wasn't necessary. She was a civilian contractor now, technically, but some patterns were burned too deep to break. 3 men are dead, Harrison said without preamble. Margaret said nothing, waited. Special Activities Division. Found in Jalalabad yesterday. Professional hits. Single shots, extreme range. Still she waited. Harrison pushed the folder across the desk. They were looking for you. Margaret opened the folder. 3 photographs. 3 men in civilian clothes, the kind of forgettable faces the agency preferred for field work. Each with a neat hole where a vital organ had been. Not my work, she said. I know. Harrison leaned forward, his face finally visible. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying secrets too heavy for one man. But someone wants it to look like it was. Someone's trying to flush me out. Or discredit you, make you a priority target. Either way, the message is clear. They're escalating. Margaret closed the folder. The question is, why now? They've let me be for 3 years. Why start hunting? Harrison's jaw tightened. The tell was subtle, but to Margaret, it might as well have been a neon sign. He knew something. Colonel, there's more. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket, inserted it into his laptop, turned the screen so she could see. A document appeared. Black bars of redaction covered most of it, but enough text remained visible. The header read Nightshade Protocol. Where did you get this? I still have friends in military intelligence. This was part of a data packet extracted from a Taliban commander's compound last month. Most of it was routine intelligence, troop movements, weapons, caches, tribal politics. This was buried inside a larger file. A deliberate plant, Margaret said. They wanted someone to find it. That's my assessment. She scanned the visible text. Phrases like asset disposal and operational containment jumped out. But the most chilling words came at the end. Protocol reactivation authorized. Nightshade, she said softly. I've heard that before. Harrison nodded. It was mentioned in the Kandahar briefing. The mission your unit never came back from. Margaret's mind raced back 3 years to a sterile briefing room in a CIA black site. 12 women in unmarked tactical gear. The mission handler sliding folders across the table. Operation Sandstorm, part of the larger Nightshade protocol. What is it? She asked. That's what I've been trying to figure out. Harrison rubbed his eyes. Whatever it is, people are willing to kill to keep it quiet, and now they're willing to kill to draw you out. The 3 sad operatives. Bait. They know you're alive. They know approximately where you are, but they can't move openly against you, not with Condor Team and me providing cover. So they're creating a situation where you'll either be branded a rogue assassin or forced to expose yourself. Why not just send another team or a drone strike if they know I'm here? Because this isn't official CIA business. Harrison's voice dropped lower. This is something else. Something personal. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Someone connected to Kandahar. Someone who was there. I think so, and I think I know who. Harrison pulled out another folder, this one thicker, older. I've been doing some digging since our conversation 3 months ago. About your unit, about Kandahar, about what really happened. He opened the folder revealing a photograph of a man in his 60s, military bearing despite the civilian suit, hard eyes that had seen too much and ordered worse. General Lawrence Blackwood, Harrison said, former Joint Special Operations Command, retired 6 years ago to form Sentinel Security Solutions, one of the largest private military contractors in the world. Sentinel currently holds over $2 billion in defense contracts, including classified operations in Afghanistan, Syria, and a dozen other hotspots. Margaret studied the face. I never met him. No, but he was overseeing Operation Sandstorm. His signature is on the mission authorization. And 3 weeks after Kandahar, he personally signed off on the death certificates for your entire unit, including mine, including yours. Which means he's one of the few people who would recognize an operative using techniques unique to a dead woman. Margaret's mind spun through the implications. The three SAT operatives, were they Sentinel contractors? No, genuine agency, but their operational orders came through a joint task force where Sentinel had advisory capacity. So Blackwood used legitimate agency assets to send a message. Clean hands, plausible deniability. Exactly. Harrison closed the folder. The question is, what does he want? If he knows you're alive, why not simply report it? Why this elaborate game? Margaret thought of her 11 teammates, thought of the building collapsing, thought of the mission that had never made sense. Because Kandahar wasn't what we were told it was, she said slowly. It wasn't about a terrorist cell. It was about something else, something connected to this Nightshade protocol. And whatever it is, Blackwood is afraid I know about it. Do you, Tom? No, but he doesn't know that. She looked at the thumb drive still plugged into Harrison's laptop. And now I need to find out. Harrison studied her face in the dim light. You realize what this means. If you start digging into Blackwood, into Nightshade, you'll be exposing yourself. No more hiding as Margaret Reynolds. I stopped hiding the moment I opened that drawer to save Condor Team. She straightened, feeling the weight of her decision settling across her shoulders. It's time to find out what happened to my sisters, what really happened in Kandahar. Harrison nodded, a soldier recognizing a battle that couldn't be avoided. I'll help where I can, but my reach is limited. I need access to classified databases, mission files for Operation Sandstorm, personnel records for my unit. Most of that will be CIA-controlled. I can't get to it without raising flags. Then I need the next best thing. Margaret's voice hardened. I need to speak with someone who was there, someone who knows what Nightshade is. Harrison was silent for a long moment. Then, there might be someone, not directly connected to your operation, but he was stationed at the forward base in Kandahar during that time. A Delta operator named Thomas Reeves. He's stateside now, Montana. Montana. Margaret felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Afghan winter. Where in Montana? A small town called Clearwater, working private security. Harrison hesitated. For Sentinel Solutions. Their eyes met in the dim light, understanding flowing between them. Not a coincidence, Margaret said. No. And the compound you showed me 3 months ago, the one with the same architecture as the building in Kandahar. 30 miles outside Clearwater, a Sentinel training facility officially. Off limits to locals, heavy security, no flight paths overhead. Margaret absorbed this, the pieces starting to align. I need leave, 2 weeks minimum. Already arranged. Your replacement arrives tomorrow. Official story is you're visiting a sick aunt in Seattle. She almost smiled. You were that sure I'd go. I was that sure you'd need to. Harrison's face was grave. But Margaret, this isn't like taking out Taliban fighters in the mountains. Blackwood has resources connections at the highest levels. If he's involved with whatever happened to your unit, he is. I can feel it. Then be careful. Sentinel contractors are former special forces, many with Delta or SEAL backgrounds. And if Blackwood suspects you're coming, he'll be waiting. Margaret nodded. Good. That makes 2 of us. The dream always started the same way. Margaret stood on a rooftop in Kandahar, rifle braced against a low wall. Through her scope, she watched her teammates enter the target building, an unremarkable 3-story structure that intelligence had identified as a terrorist safe house. Lisa went first, breaching the door with practiced precision. Aaron and Nicole followed, weapons up, covering the entry points. The others moved in disciplined sequence, exactly as they'd trained countless times. Margaret's job was overwatch, to guard her sisters from outside while they cleared the building, to ensure no surprises came from neighboring structures. The first 5 minutes went perfectly. Team communications, crisp, professional. First floor clear. Moving to second. Hallway secure. Then Rachel's voice, tense but controlled. Something's not right. This place is empty. No signs of occupation. Sarah, the team leader. Check for hidden rooms, false walls. A pause. Then Michelle, I've got something. East wall, second floor. Looks like recent construction. In the dream, Margaret's heartbeat accelerated. This was where it changed. This was where she should have recognized the danger, should have ordered them out. I'm seeing movement, she said into her comm. 3 buildings east, armed personnel. Sarah's response was immediate, hostile. Can't confirm, no clear line of sight. Margaret shifted position, trying to get a better angle. Wait, they're moving toward you, fast. Multiple tangos. Understood. Michelle, forget the wall. Everyone fall back to... The explosion cut her off. Not from outside, from within the building itself. The east wall of the second floor disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. Contact. Lisa's voice tight with alarm, taking fire from inside the structure. Gunfire erupted, the distinctive chatter of American-made M4s mixed with the heavier thump of Russian weapons. Margaret lined up shots, dropping 2 hostiles, moving toward the building. But there were more coming from multiple directions, a coordinated assault that shouldn't have been possible. We're boxed in, Sarah shouted. East stairwell blocked. But has another explosion bigger than the first. The building shuddered. Structural damage. Michelle again, her engineering background, evident even in crisis. This place is going to come down. Margaret was already moving, slinging her rifle, preparing to descend from her position to help. But she was 3 buildings away. Too far. Get out, she ordered. Everyone out, now. Working on it. Sarah's voice was strained. Rachel's down. Lisa's covering. Nicole, get that door open. The next explosion was the worst. It came from below, from the foundation itself. Margaret watched in horror as the building seemed to fold inward, collapsing floor by floor in a cascade of concrete and steel. The screams over the comms lasted 5 seconds. 5 eternal seconds of her sisters dying, while she watched helpless from a rooftop too far away to do anything but witness. Then silence. The most terrible silence she'd ever known. In reality, Margaret had maintained her position, had followed protocol, had provided cover fire for the rescue team that arrived 20 minutes later, only to confirm what she already knew. No survivors. In the dream, she did what her heart had demanded. She rushed toward the collapsed building, rifle forgotten, screaming names that no one answered. She tore at concrete with bloody hands, pulled at rebar until her muscles tore, dug through dust and death, searching for pulses that didn't exist. And then the dream shifted, as it always did. The rubble became a grave. The dust became snow. The Afghan sun became Montana moonlight. And the collapsed building rose again, whole and intact, standing in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. A perfect replica of the death trap that had taken her sisters, but pristine, untouched. Waiting. As she approached it in the dream, the door swung open. A figure stood silhouetted against warm light from within. A man in a general's uniform, stars gleaming on his shoulders. "You're late, Cobra," he said in a voice like gravel over steel. The others are already inside. She tried to speak, to ask who he was, what this meant. But no words came. The general smiled, a predator's smile that never reached his eyes. "Nightshade is waiting. All of you together again. As it should be." He stepped aside, revealing the interior. 11 women in tactical gear, their backs to the door, seated around a conference table. At the sound of her footsteps, they began to turn, began to reveal faces she'd memorized from photographs carried for 3 years. But before she could see them clearly, before she could confirm if they were alive or dead, the dream always ended. Always left her gasping awake in a cold sweat heart, hammering the general's words echoing in her mind. Nightshade is waiting. All of you together again. The commercial flight from Kabul to Frankfurt was uneventful. So was Frankfurt to New York. By the time Margaret boarded her final connection to Missoula, Montana, she'd been traveling for 22 hours and looked exactly like what her cover suggested, a tired civilian contractor heading home on leave. Her luggage contained nothing suspicious. No weapons, no tactical gear, no specialized equipment. Those would be acquired later through channels that Harrison had arranged. For now, she traveled light. Laptop, casual clothes, toiletries, a few books, the unremarkable possessions of Margaret Reynolds' logistics specialist. Only the small metal case tucked into her carry-on hinted at anything unusual. Officially, it contained prescription medication for a chronic condition. In reality, it held the same combat pharmaceuticals she'd used in the mountains that night. Focus enhancers, neural stabilizers, chemical assistance for a body trained to operate beyond normal human limits. She hadn't taken any since saving Condor Team. Hadn't needed to. But something told her that would change soon. The woman who deplaned in Missoula moved differently than the one who had left Kabul. Subtle shifts in posture, in gait, in the way her eyes tracked movement. Margaret Reynolds was receding. The ghost was reemerging. She collected her bags, passed through the small terminal, and located the rental car Harrison had arranged. A nondescript gray Ford sedan. Practical, forgettable, perfect. The drive to Clearwater took 3 hours. Rolling Montana landscape unfolded around her. Mountains swelling in the distance, pine forests thick and dark against winter brown grassland. It was beautiful country, remote, the kind of place where privacy could be purchased with acreage and distance, the kind of place where secrets could be buried deep. Clearwater itself was exactly what she'd expected. Small-town America population 2 to 500. Main Street with requisite diner hardware store bank. American flags hanging from lampposts. A slice of the heartland untouched by the wars being fought halfway across the world in its name. Margaret drove through without stopping, following GPS coordinates to a motel on the outskirts. The Pine Ridge Motor Lodge had seen better days, but it offered what she needed: anonymity. Minimal security cameras and a clear view of the approach roads. She checked in under her Margaret Reynolds identity, paid cash for a week, and carried her bags to room 117 at the far end of the building. The room was basic but clean. Twin bed dresser, small table with 2 chairs, bathroom with shower stall. She'd stayed in worse, much worse. After sweeping for obvious surveillance devices and finding none, she opened her laptop and accessed the secure file Harrison had provided. Thomas Reeves, former Delta operator, now head of security for Sentinel's Clearwater facility. The photograph showed a man in his late 30s, cropped hair, beard, the lean build of someone who maintained military fitness standards despite civilian status. According to his file, he'd been part of a quick reaction force stationed at the Kandahar base during Operation Sandstorm. Not directly involved in the mission, but present for the aftermath. One of the team who'd searched the rubble. One of the last people to see her sisters. Finding him would be easy. The file listed his habits, his schedule. Monday nights he drank at a place called Sullivan's in downtown Clearwater. Always alone. Always 3 beers, no more. Margaret checked her watch. 17:30 hours. Plenty of time. She showered, washing away the travel grime, then opened her second bag. The casual clothes of Margaret Reynolds were replaced by something more deliberate. Dark jeans, gray Henley, boots that allowed for quick movement. A jacket that concealed the knife strapped to her lower back, the only weapon she'd risk carrying until her proper equipment arrived. The woman who left room 117 wasn't quite Margaret Reynolds anymore, but she wasn't fully Cobra either. She was something in between, a ghost taking form step by careful step. Sullivan's was a typical small-town bar. Dark wood neon beer signs, a jukebox playing country music just loud enough to provide privacy for conversations. Half a dozen patrons were scattered around the room. 2 older men at the bar, a young couple in a booth, a trio of what looked like off-duty police officers playing darts. And at a corner table nursing a beer and staring at his phone sat Thomas Reeves. Margaret ordered a beer she wouldn't drink and took a seat at the bar, positioning herself to watch Reeves in the mirror behind the bottles. He looked exactly like his photograph, down to the tension he carried in his shoulders. The alertness that never quite left men who'd seen too much combat. She gave it 20 minutes, letting him settle into his routine, watching his interactions with the bartender. Minimal, familiar, his awareness of other patrons, high but not paranoid, his drinking pace measured, controlled. When he was halfway through his second beer, she moved. Casual, unhurried, just another patron shifting to a table for more comfort. She chose one that put her in his peripheral vision, close enough to notice, far enough to avoid immediate suspicion. 5 more minutes passed. She felt his attention shift, felt him registering her presence, evaluating. Standard procedure for men in their line of work, assessing every new variable in an environment. She waited until he looked directly at her, then met his gaze with deliberate recognition, held it for 3 seconds, then returned to her beer. It took him less than a minute to approach her table. "Do I know you, direct professional? No attempt at charm or pretense?" Margaret looked up, allowed a hint of smile. "Not exactly, but we have mutual acquaintances." Wariness flickered across his face. "Is that right?" "May I?" She gestured to the chair across from her. He hesitated, then sat, placing his beer carefully on the table. His right hand remained free, close to his side where a concealed weapon would be. Smart man. "You're not from Clearwater," he said, "just passing through. And these mutual acquaintances..." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Kandahar, 2018. His entire demeanor changed. The casual alertness vanished, replaced by coiled tension. His eyes, already assessing, became hard as stone. "Who are you?" The question came out flat, dangerous. Someone looking for answers about what happened there, about a building that collapsed and the women who died inside it. Reeves's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do, Sergeant Reeves. I think you were part of the QRF that responded to the incident. I think you helped search the rubble. And I think you know it wasn't a terrorist cell that brought that building down." His hand moved incrementally closer to his side. "You're mistaken. Am I about which part, that you were there, that you searched the building, or that it wasn't terrorists who rigged those explosives?" Reeves glanced around the bar, checking exit points, evaluating witnesses. Then he leaned forward, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Who sent you?" "No one sent me. I came on my own." "Bullshit. That operation was classified. The details were compartmentalized. The only people who know what happened are..." "The ones who were there," Margaret finished. "The ones who survived." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by disbelief. "No, that's not possible. The entire team was KIA. I saw the bodies myself." "You saw 11 bodies. The sniper on Overwatch wasn't in the building when it came down." "Cobra," he breathed the name like a man seeing a ghost. "They said you died in the exfil. Helicopter crash in the mountains." "They said a lot of things, most of them lies." Reeves' expression hardened again. "Prove it. Prove you're who you claim to be." Margaret recited details only someone who'd been there would know. The specific building location, the names of her teammates, the call signs used during the operation. With each detail, the color drained further from Reeves' face. "Jesus Christ," he whispered when she finished. "You're really her. Now it's your turn. Tell me what you know about Nightshade." The effect was immediate. Reeves physically recoiled, nearly knocking over his beer. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "So you do know. I know it's not something you discuss in public, or at all if you want to stay alive." He glanced around again, more urgently this time. "We can't talk here." "Where?" "Not tonight. It's not safe." He pulled a pen from his pocket, scribbled on a napkin. "Tomorrow. This address, 1400 hours. Come alone and make sure you're not followed." Margaret took the napkin, memorized the address, then tucked it into her pocket. "If this is a setup..." "It's not." His voice was grim. "But you should know something. If you're looking into Nightshade, you're already in danger. And if Blackwood finds out you're alive, that you're here, but, he shook his head. "Just watch your back." "Always do." Reeves stood, left a 20 on the table for his unfinished beer. "Tomorrow, 1400. Don't be late." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your team." What happened wasn't right. Before she could respond, he was moving toward the exit posture, stiff, the weight of their conversation visible in the set of his shoulders. Margaret remained at the table, nursing her untouched beer, mind racing. Reeves knew about Nightshade, knew it was dangerous, knew Blackwood was connected to it all. Most importantly, his reaction confirmed her suspicions. What happened in Kandahar wasn't an accident or a mission gone wrong. It was deliberate, planned. Her sisters hadn't died in the fog of war. They'd been murdered. She didn't go straight back to the motel. Standard protocol, after contact with a potential asset, indirect routes. Random patterns, surveillance detection runs. She drove clear waters, quiet streets for 40 minutes, watching for tails, evaluating sightlines, memorizing the town's layout. When she was satisfied she wasn't being followed, she parked 2 blocks from the Pine Ridge and approached on foot using shadows and blind spots to cover her approach. The motel was quiet, few cars in the lot, a single light in the office where the night manager watched television. Margaret circled to the rear of the building, entering through a side door, rather than passing her room directly. The corridor was empty, silent, except for the hum of vending machines. She reached room 117, key in hand, and froze. The door was ajar, a hairline gap between door and frame where there should have been none. She'd left it locked, had even placed a thread across the bottom corner. An old tradecraft trick to detect entry. The thread was gone. Someone had been inside. Might still be inside. Margaret dropped into a crouch, drawing the knife from her back sheath. No time to retreat, no way to know if watchers were already in position outside. Better to control the encounter, force it on her terms. She pushed the door open with her foot staying low, knife ready. The room was dark, silent, but not empty. A figure sat in the chair by the window, silhouetted against the faint glow of parking lot lights filtering through thin curtains. Female, slender, holding something in her right hand that could have been a weapon. "Hello, Melissa," the figure said, using the name Margaret hadn't heard in 3 years. The name that had belonged to Cobra before she became a ghost. "Or do you prefer Margaret now?" The voice was familiar, impossibly, heart-stoppingly familiar. "Rachel." Margaret's voice cracked on the name. The figure leaned forward, face catching enough light to reveal features Margaret knew as well as her own. Features she'd seen dying in her dreams for 3 years. Rachel Daniels, call sign, Viper, weapons specialist for the Mamba unit, her sister in arms, her friend. "Welcome to Montana," Rachel said, raising the object in her hand. Not a weapon, a glass. "Sorry about breaking in old habits." "You're dead," Margaret whispered. "I saw the building collapse. I saw them recover your body. You saw what they wanted you to see." Rachel took a sip from her glass. "Just like they saw what they wanted to see with you. A convenient death, a closed file." "How?" "Same as you. I wasn't in the building when it came down. I'd found something in the east wall, something that didn't belong. I went outside to get better light to examine it." She shook her head. 30 seconds later, everything exploded. Margaret stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her, mind racing to process the impossible. Rachel alive. After 3 years of mourning, of guilt, of questions without answers. The others, she asked, though she already knew. Rachel's expression confirmed it. Gone, all of them. Only you and I made it out. "And you've been here, all this time, in Montana." "Not at first. First there was debriefing, psychological evaluation, new identity creation." Rachel's voice turned bitter. "All the same procedures they used on you, I imagine. Except at the end, they gave me a choice. Disappear completely like you or work for them in a new capacity." "For who, the CIA?" "No, for Blackwood, for Sentinel." She drained her glass. "For the man who killed our sisters." Margaret's blood went cold. "You're working for Blackwood. The man responsible for Kandahar." "Yes and no." Rachel set down her glass. "Yes, I work for Sentinel. No, Blackwood wasn't responsible for Kandahar. At least that's what I believed until recently." "What changed?" "I found something. Documentation about Nightshade. About what really happened that day." She met Margaret's gaze directly. "And then I heard rumors about a woman in Afghanistan, a ghost sniper saving special forces teams, using techniques only one person I knew could perform." "How did you find me here?" "I've been tracking you since you landed in Missoula. I have access to transportation manifests through Sentinel. When I saw Margaret Reynolds on a flight from Kabul, it wasn't hard to connect the dots." Margaret's mind raced, evaluating angles, threats, possibilities. "If you know I'm here, does Blackwood?" "Not yet, but he will soon. Reeves will tell him." "Reeves, but he is Sentinel's head of security and completely loyal to Blackwood." Rachel's smile was grim. "Your meeting tomorrow is a trap. They'll be waiting with a full tactical team." Margaret absorbed this anger and caution warring within her. Why are you telling me this? Why warn me if you work for them? Rachel stood, stepped closer. In the dim light, Margaret could see changes in her friend. New scars, harder eyes, the weight of years spent living a lie. Because I made a choice 3 years ago based on what I thought was true. Blackwood told me you were the traitor, that you'd sold out the team, arranged the ambush. He showed me evidence. Communications, bank, transfers, all pointing to you. And you believed him. I had a bullet in my leg, drugs in my system, and 11 dead sisters. Yes, I believed him. Pain flashed across Rachel's face. For 3 years I believed him, worked for him, helped him build his private army, and then I found the Nightshade files. What did they say? Enough to make me question everything, enough to make me start looking deeper. And the deeper I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. She took a breath. 2 months ago, I accessed Blackwood's private server, found the original operation plans for Kandahar. We weren't sent there to eliminate a terrorist cell. Then what? We were sent to retrieve something called the Nightshade Protocol. Intelligence indicated it was hidden in that building, in a compartment in the east wall, exactly where I was looking when the explosives detonated. What is the Nightshade Protocol? Documentation. Evidence of illegal operations conducted by a CIA black unit under Blackwood's command. Operations even the agency didn't know about. Assassinations, weapons deals, drug trafficking, all to fund black projects Congress would never approve. Margaret's mind reeled with the implications. And someone hid this evidence in Kandahar. A former operative named Michael Winters. He'd been part of Blackwood's unit before growing a conscience. He stole the documentation as insurance, then went into hiding. When intelligence located him in Kandahar, Blackwood sent us to retrieve the evidence. But it was a trap. Rachel nodded. Winters never trusted anyone to come for the files. The building was rigged from the start. But Blackwood knew that. He knew we'd never get those files out. That wasn't the point. What was the point? To ensure the evidence was destroyed and to eliminate the only unit that could have been traced back to him if things went wrong. 2 birds, 1 stone. Margaret felt sick. He sacrificed 12 women to cover his crimes. 11 women. He thought it was 12, but you survived. And now I have to get you out of here before they realize you're in Montana, before Reeves' trap is sprung. But Margaret was already shaking her head. No, I didn't come here to run away again. I came for answers, for justice. Justice? Rachel laughed bitterly. Against Blackwood, he has private armies, political connections, more money than God. The best we can do is disappear. Live to fight another day. That's what I've been doing for 3 years. It hasn't brought me any closer to the truth. It hasn't honored our sisters. Margaret stepped closer, took Rachel's hands in hers. But now there's 2 of us. 2 ghosts instead of 1. And we have something Blackwood doesn't know about. What's that? The original Nightshade files. They weren't destroyed in Kandahar. Rachel's eyes widened. How do you know? Because Harrison found intel that Blackwood is searching for them, that he's reactivated the Nightshade Protocol to locate them. He wouldn't do that if they'd been destroyed with our team. Harrison, Colonel Frank Harrison. Rachel looked shocked. He's involved in this. He's been helping me, providing intel resources. You trust him? With my life. He's the one who found the connection to Montana, to Sentinel, to the compound outside Clearwater. Rachel went very still. The compound, you know about the compound. I know it's an exact replica of the building in Kandahar. What I don't know is why Blackwood built it. Something dark passed across Rachel's face. I can tell you why. Because he's recreating the operation. He's built an exact replica of the killing ground because he's planning to do it again. Do what again? Kill another team? No, find the Nightshade files. He believes they're still out there, that Winters had a contingency plan, that someone else has them. And he's willing to sacrifice as many people as necessary to locate them and eliminate anyone who might have seen them. Margaret processed this, the pieces falling into place. That's why they're trying to draw me out. They think I have the files or know where they are. Do you, no, but I know someone who might. Who? Margaret hesitated, weighing trust against caution. Rachel had been her friend, her sister in arms, but she'd also spent 3 years working for the man who'd murdered their team. the man who tried to murder them both. Melissa, Rachel said softly, using the name from before. We're the only ones left. The only ones who can make this right. I've spent 3 years believing a lie working for the man who killed our sisters. Help me fix that. The sincerity in her voice, the pain in her eyes. They were real. Or an incredibly convincing performance. In their line of work, either was possible, but some risks had to be taken. Harrison said there's someone else who was there that day, someone who might know what Winters did with the files, where he might have hidden a backup. Michael Winters' handler, CIA case officer who managed his extraction from Blackwood's unit, the one who helped him hide the original files in Kandahar. That's impossible, Rachel said. Winters' handler died in a car accident 2 weeks after Kandahar. Blackwood made sure of it. That's what the official record says. But Harrison found evidence she's alive, living under a new identity just like us. We're a small town called Green River, living as a high school history teacher named Eleanor Bishop. Rachel absorbed this. If you're right, if she's alive and knows where the files are, then we have leverage. We have a way to bring Blackwood down, to get justice for our sisters. Rachel was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but not tomorrow. Reeves has already set the trap. Sentinel has a tactical team prepping as we speak. We need to be gone before dawn. What about the compound? If it's an exact replica of Kandahar, it might contain evidence. It's a fortress. Security systems, armed guards, the works. We'd need an army to breach it. Or 2 ghosts, Margaret had said, a plan already forming. 2 ghosts who know exactly how it's laid out because they've been there before. Rachel studied her face, saw the determination there, and slowly smiled. It was the smile Margaret remembered from missions past. Fierce focus, the expression of a predator sighting prey. 2 ghosts, she agreed. But first we need to disappear from Clearwater. Before Blackwood realizes there are 2 Mamba operators still alive and in his backyard. Margaret nodded, mind already shifting to extraction protocols, escape routes, contingency plans. The skills coming back like muscle memory, like they'd never left. Pack your gear, she told Rachel. We move in 30 minutes. As Rachel gathered her few possessions, Margaret caught herself watching, still not quite believing her friend was alive. For 3 years, she'd carried the weight of those deaths, the guilt of being the only survivor. Now that burden was halved, shared with the one person who could truly understand. But new questions replaced the old. Could she trust Rachel completely? Was the trap set by Reeves real? Or was Rachel leading her into a different kind of ambush? And what would they find in Wyoming if they located Winters' handler? The answers would have to wait. For now, they needed to move. To become ghosts again, slipping away before Blackwood's net could close around them. Outside, the Montana night was cold and clear stars brilliant in the vast sky. Somewhere in the darkness, killers were preparing to hunt. But they didn't know that their prey had become predators. That the ghosts they sought to exorcise were gathering strength, forming an alliance that would bring long-delayed justice. 11 women had died in Kandahar. 11 sisters betrayed by the man who'd sent them to die. Their bodies were buried, their names redacted from official records, their sacrifice hidden behind classification and lies. But memory remained, and vengeance was coming. 2 ghosts would make sure of it. The Wyoming landscape unfolded beneath a steel-gray dawn, vast and unforgiving. Margaret drove while Rachel slept, head against the passenger window, breath fogging the glass in rhythmic patterns. They'd been on the road for 6 hours, having left Clearwater well before first light, taking back roads, and switching vehicles twice to break any surveillance. The old Ford pickup they now traveled in had been waiting at a prearranged location, one of Harrison's contingency plans established months ago when he'd first connected Margaret's past to Montana. The colonel's foresight continued to impress. More importantly, it confirmed his loyalty. A man setting a trap wouldn't have provided such meticulous escape routes. Margaret glanced at her sleeping companion, still processing the reality of Rachel's existence. For 3 years, she'd mourned 11 sisters. Now that number was 10. A small mercy, but one she clung to with fierce gratitude. Yet caution tempered her joy. Rachel had spent those same 3 years working for Blackwood, believing Margaret was the traitor. Had that belief truly been shattered by the evidence she claimed to have found? Or was this another layer of deception, a complex play to draw out whatever knowledge Margaret might possess about the Nightshade files. Trust had once been absolute between them. In the Mamba unit, they'd placed their lives in each other's hands without hesitation. But Kandahar had changed everything. 3 years of separation, of different paths, of secrets and lies. It created a chasm not easily bridged, even by their shared history. "You're thinking too loud," Rachel murmured, eyes still closed. "I can practically hear the gears turning." Margaret allowed a small smile. "Just navigating." "Liar." Rachel straightened, blinking away sleep. "You're trying to decide if you can trust me. Can I? If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have warned you about Reeves' trap. Unless Blackwood wants me alive. Unless there's something he thinks I know that can't be extracted from a corpse." Rachel's eyes, still sharp despite her recent sleep, studied Margaret's profile. "You always were the paranoid one." "Not paranoid, cautious. And I was always the reckless one." Rachel stretched, wincing at stiff muscles. "Ironic that I'm the one telling you to be careful now." The highway stretched before them, empty in the early morning light. Another hour to Green River, to Eleanor Bishop. If she existed, if she was really Michael Winter's handler, if she had any knowledge of the Nightshade files. Too many ifs, too many variables. But it was the only lead they had. "Tell me about Blackwood," Margaret said. "About Sentinel, about what you've been doing for 3 years. Rachel was quiet for a moment, gathering thoughts, or perhaps constructing lies. "After Kandahar, after they pulled me from the rubble, I spent 2 months in a private medical facility. Broken leg, internal injuries, concussion. During recovery, Blackwood visited regularly, brought me files, evidence, recordings, all pointing to you as the leak that got our team killed." "What kind of evidence?" "Communications intercepts, bank transfers to accounts in your name, meeting logs with known Taliban assets, all expertly fabricated, I know now. But then," she shook her head, "I was broken, Melissa. Physically, mentally. 11 sisters dead. The only other survivor, allegedly a traitor. I wanted someone to blame." "So you believed him?" "I did. And when he offered me a position with Sentinel, a chance to continue the work our unit had been doing but in the private sector, I took it." "What kind of work?" Rachel's expression hardened. "The kind that doesn't officially exist. Extraction of high-value targets from denied areas. Asset elimination. Intelligence gathering in places where the U.S. government can't officially operate. Mercenary work. High-end mercenary work, with resources the Mamba unit could only dream about. Unlimited funding, cutting-edge equipment, political protection at the highest levels. And no oversight," Margaret added. "No accountability." That was the point. Blackwood built Sentinel to continue the operations he'd been running through the CIA black units, but without the constraints of government bureaucracy. "Including Nightshade," Rachel nodded. "Especially Nightshade. It was his crown jewel, his ultimate insurance policy. Documentation of operations so sensitive that exposure would bring down administrations, destabilize alliances, maybe even trigger wars. And that's what Winters stole, what he hid in Kandahar. Part of it. The original files contained everything. Names, dates, locations, bank accounts. A complete record of 20 years of unsanctioned operations. Winters took a portion when he defected enough to prove the program existed, so without revealing all its secrets. And why not take everything? Why leave anything behind? Because he wasn't a traitor, not in his own mind. He didn't want to damage national security or endanger field assets. He just wanted leverage against Blackwood, protection from a man who eliminated problems permanently. Margaret processed this, connecting dots, seeing the larger picture emerge. So when intelligence located Winters in Kandahar, Blackwood saw an opportunity to recover the stolen files and eliminate the Mamba unit in one operation. We'd been asking too many questions, getting too close to Nightshade through our regular missions. He decided we were a liability. But you survived, and so did I. Yes, his perfect plan failed. Twice. And now he's built a replica of the Kandahar building in Montana. Why? What's he looking for?" Rachel's expression turned grim. "Winters had a failsafe. Before hiding the files in Kandahar, he created a backup, something he called the key, a data package that would lead to a complete copy of the Nightshade documentation stored somewhere secure. And Blackwood thinks rebuilding the site will help him find this key. He's convinced the building itself contains clues, that Winters incorporated its architecture into his backup plan somehow. Rachel shook her head. He's obsessed with it, has teams of analysts studying every brick, every wire, comparing it to the original blueprints, looking for anomalies, hidden messages, anything. Has he found anything? Not that I know of, but he's convinced it's there, and he's willing to go to extreme lengths to find it, including drawing me out of hiding. You're the last loose end from Kandahar, the last person who might have information about what Winters did, where he might have hidden the key. But I don't. I was providing overwatch. I never entered the building. Blackwood doesn't know that. Your mission file listed you as part of the entry team. The last-minute change to Overwatch wasn't documented. Margaret fell silent, processing this new information. If Blackwood believed she had knowledge of the key, it explained the elaborate efforts to find her. It also meant he wouldn't stop until she was captured or confirmed dead. The miles passed as both women retreated into their thoughts. The Wyoming landscape changed around them, mountains giving way to high desert plains scattered with sagebrush and stunted pines. The sky expanded a vast blue dome that made human concerns seem small by comparison. But their concerns weren't small. If what Rachel said was true, if the Nightshade files contained what she claimed, then the stakes were immense. National security, international relations, justice for their fallen sisters. Everything hinged on finding Winter's handler, on learning what she knew about the key. We should be prepared for the possibility that Eleanor Bishop won't talk to us, Margaret said finally. Or that she doesn't know anything useful. Or that she doesn't exist, Rachel added. Or that she's working for Blackwood now, like I was. You think Harrison's intel could be wrong? I think we need to be prepared for anything. Blackwood has resources connections. If he knows we're looking for Bishop, the implication hung in the air. Another trap, another ambush, another betrayal. We'll approach carefully, Margaret decided. Reconnaissance first. Establish that she exists, that she matches the description Harrison provided. Then make contact only if we're confident it's secure. Rachel nodded approval. Like old times, except now we don't have Sarah running tactical or Michelle on comms. The name sent a pang through Margaret's chest. Sarah Cooper, team leader. Michelle Davis, communications specialist. Both lost in Kandahar. Both faces that haunted her dreams. We make do with what we have, she said softly. 2 ghosts instead of 12 operators. 2 ghosts, Rachel echoed. Let's hope it's enough. Green River, Wyoming. Population 12,000. A small city built around the railroad and mining industries, now sustained primarily by tourism and its position along Interstate 80. Unremarkable. Forgettable. The perfect place to disappear. They left the pickup at a truck stop on the outskirts, switching to a nondescript sedan they paid cash for through a connection Harrison had arranged. Standard protocol for approaching a potentially compromised location, nothing that could be traced back to their starting point. Eleanor Bishop, according to Harrison's intel, taught American history at Green River High School. Lived alone in a modest house on Cedar Street. No pets, no family, few friends. The carefully constructed life of someone who didn't want to be noticed. They parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, moving separately to avoid attention. Margaret took the east side of the street, Rachel the west. Both dressed in casual clothes that would blend with local residents, jeans, boots, light jackets against the spring chill. Bishop's house was a single-story ranch-style white with blue trim. Small yard, well-maintained but not meticulous. Nothing to draw attention or suggest the occupant was anything other than what she appeared to be, a high school teacher in a small Wyoming town. Margaret positioned herself at a coffee shop, with a view of the house, nursing a cup she didn't drink. Rachel found a similar vantage point at a park bench, pretending to read a book while maintaining surveillance. They communicated via text messages sent through encrypted burner phones, sharing observations, building a picture of Bishop's routine. By mid-afternoon, they'd confirmed her existence. A woman matching Harrison's description, early 50s, medium height, auburn hair, going gray, left the house at 07:30, drove to Green River High School, taught classes all day, then returned home at 16:30. Nothing in her movements suggested awareness of surveillance or counterintelligence training. She behaved exactly like a career educator with 20 years of classroom experience. which meant either Harrison's intel was wrong or Eleanor Bishop was very, very good at her cover. They maintained observation until nightfall, watching as lights came on in the house, as Bishop moved from room to room, as she settled in the living room with what appeared to be student papers to grade. "She lives alone," Rachel texted. "No visitors, no signs of security measures beyond standard locks and a basic alarm system." "Approaching tonight would be too risky," Margaret replied. "Too many unknowns. Let's maintain surveillance until we're certain." But certainty was a luxury they didn't have. At 2100 hours, Rachel's phone buzzed with a message from a number that shouldn't have been able to contact them. Harrison's emergency protocol. Compromise. Sentinel team deployed to Green River. Ida unknown. Evacuate immediately. Margaret's phone buzzed with the same message seconds later. Their eyes met across the darkened street, understanding flowing between them. They'd been tracked despite their precautions. Blackwood knew they were in Green River, knew they were looking for Bishop, which meant Bishop was in danger too. No time for careful planning now. No time for the methodical approach they'd intended. Margaret was already moving toward the house, Rachel falling in beside her as they converged on the front door. Standard procedure would have been to retreat, to disappear back into the shadows, to regroup and approach from a different angle. But if Sentinel operators were inbound, if Bishop possessed information about Nightshade, they couldn't risk her being captured or killed before they made contact. Margaret knocked on the door 3 sharp raps. Authoritative, demanding attention. No response. Rachel moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Still in the living room, papers spread out. She heard the knock but isn't moving. Margaret knocked again, harder. "Ms. Bishop," she called loud enough to be heard inside but not by neighbors. "We need to talk. It's about Michael Winters." Movement inside, the sound of papers being gathered hastily, footsteps moving not toward the door but away from it. "She's running," Rachel said. "Back of the house." They moved in unison, muscle memory from years of joint operations. Rachel circled left, Margaret right, converging on the rear of the small house where a back door opened onto a fenced yard. They reached it just as the door flew open, and Eleanor Bishop emerged, a go bag in one hand, car keys in the other. She froze at the sight of them, eyes widening with recognition and fear. "Who sent you?" she demanded, voice steady despite her obvious alarm. "CIA Sentinel." "Neither," Margaret said, keeping her hands visible, non-threatening. "We're former Mamba unit. We need your help." Bishop's expression shifted from fear to disbelief. "Mamba unit was eliminated in Kandahar. 2018. "Not all of us," Rachel said, stepping closer into the light spilling from the open door. "Some ghosts refuse to stay buried." Bishop studied them, calculation replacing fear. "Prove it. Identify yourselves. Call signs and specialties." "Cobra," Margaret said. "Sniper infiltration specialist. Primary overwatch for the Kandahar operation." "Viper," Rachel added. "Weapons and demolitions expert. I was examining the east wall when the charges detonated." Bishop's posture changed subtly, a minute relaxation, a shift from flight to assessment. "You shouldn't be alive, either of you." "Neither should you," Margaret countered. "Jessica Mills, CIA case officer. Supposedly killed in a car accident 2 weeks after Kandahar." A ghost of a smile touched Bishop's lips. "Touché." She glanced past them, scanning the darkness beyond her yard. "How long do we have?" "Unknown," Rachel said. "Harrison sent a warning. Sentinel team en route." "Harrison," Bishop repeated. "Frank Harrison. He's involved in this." "He's been helping us," Margaret explained. "Provided the intel that led us to you." Bishop seemed to make a decision. "Inside, quickly. We don't have much time." They followed her back into the house, through a kitchen with children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator, a teacher's trophies, and into a living room where papers were scattered across a coffee table. Bishop went straight to a bookshelf, removed a false panel, and extracted a small safe. Her fingers moved quickly over the keypad. "I always knew this day might come," she said as the safe opened, "that someone would eventually connect Jessica Mills to Eleanor Bishop. I just didn't expect it to be 2 ghosts from the Mamba unit." She removed a thumb drive, closed the safe, and faced them. "This contains everything I know about Nightshade, about what really happened in Kandahar, about what Michael was trying to prevent." Margaret took the drive, tucked it securely into an inner pocket. "We need more than data. We need context. What is Nightshade exactly? What makes it so dangerous that Blackwood would kill 12 women to protect it? 11, Rachel corrected automatically. 12, Bishop said, her expression grim. Michael Winters didn't survive Kandahar either. He was in the building when it collapsed. The revelation hit like a physical blow. He was there inside, but intelligence said, intelligence was manipulated by Blackwood. Michael wasn't hiding in Kandahar. He was being held there by the same Taliban unit that ambushed your team. They'd captured him 2 weeks earlier while he was attempting to make contact with an asset who could help him expose Nightshade. So the mission was a trap from the beginning, Rachel said. We were never meant to extract Winters or recover files. No, Blackwood knew Michael was being held in that building, knew he'd hidden a portion of the Nightshade documentation there. The Mamba unit was sent in to ensure both were destroyed, the files and the man who stole them. Margaret's mind raced, reconstructing the mission in light of this new information. The explosives that brought down the building were placed by Blackwood's men disguised as a CIA support team. They were waiting for your unit to enter, then detonated the charges remotely. Bishop's face hardened with old anger. 12 women sent to die plus the one man who could have exposed the whole operation. But the Nightshade files survived, Rachel said. Blackwood is still looking for them, still afraid they'll be found. Because Michael was smarter than Blackwood gave him credit for. Bishop moved to a desk in the corner, unlocked a drawer, withdrew a faded photograph. He knew he might be captured or killed, knew the files in Kandahar might be destroyed, so he created a backup. A complete copy of everything hidden somewhere only he and one other person knew about. She handed them the photograph. 2 men in civilian clothes standing before a nondescript building. One was younger with intense eyes and the wary posture of someone accustomed to looking over his shoulder. The other was older, white-haired, with the sturdy build of a man who had spent his life in physical labor. Michael Winters, Bishop indicated the younger man, and Robert Callahan, his uncle, former Army Corps of Engineers retired to a small town in Idaho, the one person Michael trusted with his contingency plan. The key, Margaret said, remembering Rachel's words. Winters created a backup and a key to find it. Bishop nodded. The key is a set of coordinates encrypted within a specific sequence of numbers. Michael told me about it but never shared the actual location. Said it was safer if only he and his uncle knew. And Blackwood knows about this key. He knows it exists, doesn't know what form it takes or who might have it. That's why he rebuilt the Kandahar building in Montana. He's convinced Michael hid clues in the structure itself, encoded information that would lead to the backup files. Is he right? Rachel asked. Did Winters hide something in the building's design? Not in the way Blackwood thinks. Bishop took the photograph back, traced a finger over the building in the background. This is where Robert Callahan worked before retirement, a storage facility for the Corps of Engineers outside Boise, Idaho. Michael spent summers there as a teenager helping his uncle. He knew the place intimately, knew its security systems, its blind spots. Understanding dawned in Margaret's eyes. The Kandahar building wasn't random. Winters chose it specifically because its layout was similar to this facility in Idaho. Exactly. The east wall where Rachel was searching, it corresponds to a maintenance room in the Idaho facility, a room with access to an old Cold War-era bunker beneath the main structure, a perfect place to hide files too dangerous to be discovered. So the key is what coordinates to this facility. The key is the specific location within the bunker system. It's extensive, designed to shelter personnel in case of nuclear attack. Without precise directions, you could search for months and never find what Michael hid. Rachel looked troubled. If Blackwood captures Callahan, forces him to reveal the location, he won't. Bishop's voice was certain. Robert died 2 years ago. Heart attack. Took the exact location to his grave. Then the key is lost, Margaret said. Not necessarily. Bishop checked her watch, tension evident in the gesture. Michael created redundancy, told his uncle the location, yes, but also encoded it into something else. Something Blackwood would never think to look for. What? A crash from the front of the house interrupted before Bishop could answer. The distinctive sound of a tactical entry, door being breached, flashbang, grenade detonating. Sentinel, Rachel hissed, already moving toward the back door. They're here. Bishop grabbed Margaret's arm. Blue Ridge Cemetery, Boise, Robert Callahan's grave. The key is there. Find it before Blackwood does. Gunfire erupted from the front hallway. Margaret pulled Bishop toward the rear exit, but the older woman shook her head. I'll slow you down. I'll buy you time. Go. We're not leaving you, Margaret insisted. You have to. The thumb drive has everything you need to understand Nightshade to bring Blackwood down, but only if you survive to use it. Bishop pulled a small revolver from an ankle holster. This isn't my first rodeo, Cobra. Now go. Find the key. Finish what Michael started. Another explosion rocked the house. Rachel grabbed Margaret's arm, pulling her toward the exit. She's right. We have to move. Now. The last glimpse Margaret had of Eleanor Bishop was the woman positioning herself behind a heavy oak desk revolver, steady in her hands facing the hallway where Sentinel operators would appear at any moment. Then they were running through the backyard, scaling the fence, disappearing into the darkness beyond. The sound of gunfire followed them. A brief, intense exchange, then silence. They didn't stop to look back. Couldn't afford the luxury of concern for a woman they'd just met. Their only priority now was escape, was distance, was survival. They moved through Green River like the ghosts. They were avoiding main streets, using shadows and service alleys to make their way to the emergency extraction point Harrison had established. An old warehouse on the industrial edge of town where another vehicle waited, a heavy-duty Jeep with off-road capabilities and a full tank of gas. No words were necessary as they cleared the vehicle for tracking devices, confirmed its operational status, and prepared to depart. 3 years of separation hadn't diminished their ability to work together seamlessly, to communicate through gesture and shared understanding. Only when they were 10 miles outside Green River heading west on a secondary highway that paralleled I-80 did Rachel break the silence. You think she made it? Margaret didn't pretend to misunderstand. No, Sentinel doesn't leave witnesses. She knew that, chose to stay anyway. She was tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder. Margaret's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 3 years is a long time to be a ghost. The implication hung between them, that they too had been ghosts for 3 years, that they too felt the weight of that existence. The constant vigilance, the isolation, the loss of identity that came with living a lie. Boise, Rachel said after a long silence. That's where we're headed to find Callahan's grave. It's our only lead to the key. Margaret checked the rearview mirror, a habitual sweep for pursuers. And we have the thumb drive. Whatever Bishop knew about Nightshade, it's there. Along with targets painted on our backs, Blackwood will assume we have the information. He'll throw everything he has at finding us. Let him try. 2 ghosts are harder to catch than 1. Rachel managed a grim smile. Always the optimist. Realist, Margaret corrected. We've evaded him for 3 years separately. Together with what we know now, we have a fighting chance. The Wyoming night enfolded them, stars scattered across the vastness like silent witnesses to their journey. Somewhere behind them, Sentinel operatives were securing Green River, searching for traces of their passage. Somewhere ahead, Boise waited with its cemetery and the secret buried with Robert Callahan. And somewhere beyond that, if they survived, if they found the key, if they located the Nightshade files, justice waited. For their sisters, for Michael Winters, for themselves. It was enough to keep driving, enough to keep fighting, enough to remain ghosts a little longer. The server room hummed with the sound of cooling fans and data processing. General Lawrence Blackwood stood before a wall of monitors, hands clasped behind his back, posture still military perfect despite his transition to civilian life. Each screen displayed different information: surveillance footage, personnel files, satellite imagery, data analytics, all focused on one objective: finding the 2 women who should have died in Kandahar 3 years ago. Confirmed, a technician said, looking up from his station. Bishop is down. No sign of Reynolds or Daniels at the residence. They escaped before our team secured the perimeter. Blackwood's expression didn't change. And Bishop's electronic devices. Retrieved, being analyzed now. Initial scan shows extensive encryption. Will take time to break. Time is a luxury we no longer have. Blackwood turned to a man standing in the shadows, lean, scarred, with the dead eyes of a career killer. Omar, your assessment. Omar Al-Fadil stepped forward, studying the surveillance footage from Green River. His right hand missing two fingers flexed unconsciously. "They will go to ground," he said, accent thick but words precise. "Change vehicles, avoid main roads. But they have a destination now, something Bishop told them." "Agreed. Options. Satellite surveillance of all routes heading west from Green River. They'll avoid I-80, but there are limited alternatives. And they'll need fuel eventually." "Make it happen." Blackwood turned to another subordinate. "What's the status on Harrison?" "Under surveillance, sir. Still at Eagle Rock Fob in Afghanistan. No unusual communications detected. He's involved, has been from the beginning, feeding them information, providing resources." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Have our asset at the Pentagon expedite his recall. I want him stateside within 48 hours." "Yes, sir." "In the Montana facility, security doubled as ordered. Full tactical team on standby. If they attempt to access the structure, we'll be ready." Blackwood nodded, satisfied. "They won't go there, not yet. They're looking for the key first, which means—" He trailed off, mind racing ahead, calculating possibilities. "Sir," the technician prompted. "Idaho." Blackwood's voice was certain. "They're heading to Idaho. That's where Robert Callahan lived, where he died." "Callahan's connection to Winters was never established officially," the technician said cautiously. "It was suspected, but—" "Because I kept it that way," Blackwood snapped. "Official channels are compromised, have been for years. Why do you think Nightshade exists in the first place?" He turned back to the monitors. Focused surveillance on Boise, Callahan's last known residence, his workplace, his associates, and his burial site, Al-Fadil added quietly. "If I wished to hide something that would outlast me, I would consider a grave. Permanent, respected, rarely disturbed." Blackwood's eyes lit with understanding. "Blue Ridge Cemetery. That's where Callahan is buried." He turned to his communications officer. "Contact our Boise team. I want that cemetery under surveillance immediately. No one approaches Callahan's grave without being identified and tracked." "Yes, sir." "And prepare the Sentinel jet. I'm going to Boise personally." Blackwood's face hardened. "It's time to end this. 3 years is long enough for ghosts to haunt us." Al-Fadil studied his employer with clinical detachment. "These are not ordinary ghosts, General. These are women trained to be invisible, to kill without trace, to survive against impossible odds." "They're still human," Blackwood countered. "Still vulnerable. Still make mistakes." "As do we all," Al-Fadil murmured, flexing his maimed hand again. "That is why I still breathe and why Cobra still hunts." Blackwood ignored the implied criticism. "Your history with her makes you valuable, Omar. You've faced her and survived. You understand how she thinks, how she operates. I understand that underestimating her is lethal." Al-Fadil's eyes moved to the surveillance footage, studying the last images captured of Margaret and Rachel fleeing Green River. "You have seen her file, read reports of her abilities. But you have not seen her work, have not felt the wind of her bullet passing so close it parts your hair before you hear the shot." "Poetic," Blackwood said dryly, "but ultimately irrelevant. No single operator, however skilled, can stand against Sentinel's resources. It is not one operator now, it is two. Two ghosts who know your secrets, who have nothing left to lose." Al-Fadil shook his head. "This will not end as cleanly as you hope, General." "It will end how I determine it ends." Blackwood straightened his jacket, a businessman's suit cut to military precision. "I've spent 3 years building Sentinel, securing contracts, establishing political protection. I won't let two rogue operators threaten everything I've created, even if they have evidence of Nightshade, of what really happened in Kandahar. Especially then." Blackwood's voice dropped, became deadly serious. "Nightshade isn't just an operation, Omar. It's necessary. For national security. For global stability. What's contained in those files would destabilize alliances, destroy careers, maybe even trigger conflicts. The greater good demands they remain buried. And the women who died for this greater good. The Mamba unit, Michael Winters. Acceptable losses in a war most Americans don't even know is being fought." Blackwood checked his watch. "The jet will be ready in 30 minutes. I want full tactical gear loaded, a secure communications suite established on board, and real-time updates on all surveillance efforts." "Yes, sir." The subordinates moved to comply, leaving Blackwood alone with Alpha Deal. "You disapprove," Blackwood said when the others had gone. "I am a professional. I do not judge the missions I am paid to complete." Alpha Deal's expression remained neutral. "But I respect worthy adversaries, and I wonder if you truly understand what you are hunting." "Enlighten me." "You created the Mamba unit for deniable operations in denied areas, trained them to be shadows to leave no trace to accomplish the impossible. Then you tried to eliminate them when they became inconvenient." Alpha Deal's eyes met Blackwood's directly. "But you failed, and now two of those shadows are hunting you using everything you taught them." "Your point?" "My point, General, is that you created the perfect weapon, then gave it every reason to turn against you. That rarely ends well for the creator." Blackwood's laugh was cold dismissive. "Save the philosophical musings for your memoirs, Omar. I need your skills, not your insights." "As you wish." Alpha Deal inclined his head slightly. "I will prepare for Boise." As the mercenary left, Blackwood turned back to the monitors, to the endless stream of data tracking the ghosts he'd created and failed to eliminate. His reflections stared back at him from the darkened portions of the screens. A man who'd spent decades in the shadows conducting operations no one could know about, making decisions that shaped world events from behind closed doors. He'd sacrificed much for what he believed was necessary. Friends, colleagues, principles. The Mamba unit had been just one more sacrifice on that altar of necessity. A regrettable one, perhaps, but unavoidable, given what was at stake. Now two survivors threatened everything. Two ghosts with the potential to expose Nightshade, to bring down not just Blackwood, but dozens of others in positions of power. Military leaders, intelligence directors, elected officials who'd authorize operations beyond the bounds of law or morality. He couldn't allow it, wouldn't allow it, no matter the cost. "Find them," he murmured to the empty room, to the faceless operators monitoring communications and surveillance feeds. "Find them and end this, permanently." The miles between Green River and Boise passed in a blur of tension and vigilance. Margaret and Rachel alternated driving duties, taking secondary roads that added hours to their journey but decreased the likelihood of interception. They spoke little, conserving energy, processing the revelations from Bishop. The thumb drive remained secure, unexamined. Without a secure location and proper equipment, accessing its contents was too risky. Electronic breadcrumbs could be traced, signals intercepted. Better to wait until they reached Boise, until they found a safe house where they could properly analyze the information. Dawn was breaking as they crossed into Idaho, the landscape changing from Wyoming's high plains to more rugged terrain. They stopped only for fuel, using cash, avoiding security cameras never lingering long enough to be memorable. By mid-morning, they'd reached the outskirts of Boise. The city spread before them, nestled against the foothills of the Boise Mountains, the Boise River winding through its heart. A small metropolis of approximately 230,000, large enough to disappear into, but small enough to navigate efficiently. "We need a secure location," Rachel said, studying a map on her phone. "Somewhere to rest, regroup, examine Bishop's data." "And we need to locate Blue Ridge Cemetery," Margaret added. "Find Callahan's grave before Blackwood's people do." "Assuming they haven't already, we have to consider the possibility that Bishop was compromised before we arrived, that Blackwood knows exactly what we're looking for." It was a sobering thought. If Sentinel was already watching the cemetery approaching, it would be walking into another trap. "First things first," Margaret decided. "Secure location, equipment, then reconnaissance of the cemetery before we make any move toward Callahan's grave." They found what they needed in a modestly priced extended-stay hotel on the city's eastern edge. Anonymous. Cash only for a week's stay. A corner unit with clear sight lines to the parking lot and rear exit. The kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as bills were paid and noise was minimal. While Rachel secured the room, sweeping for surveillance devices and establishing basic security measures, Margaret used one of their burner phones to contact Harrison via encrypted text. "Green River compromised. Bishop down. Location Boise. Needs secure equipment, drop, and cemetery surveillance." The response came minutes later. "Equipment storage locker 247 Boise. Central storage, 1500 West Main. Key under south edge of dumpster. Cemetery satellite images uploading to secure server. Access code to follow." Margaret smiled grimly. Harrison continued to demonstrate why he'd risen to colonel, anticipating needs, preparing contingencies, supporting his operators without micromanagement. She'd miss him when this was over, if she survived. By noon, they had established their temporary base of operations. The hotel room's tables were covered with maps of Boise printouts of Blue Ridge Cemetery's layout and surveillance equipment retrieved from the storage locker Harrison had prepared. Laptops with enhanced security features, communications devices, even basic tactical gear. Most importantly, they now had a secure system to examine Bishop's thumb drive. "Ready?" Rachel asked, holding the drive poised at the laptop's USB port. Margaret nodded, tension coiling in her stomach. Whatever was on that drive had cost Eleanor Bishop her life, had arguably cost their entire unit, Michael Winters, countless others touched by Nightshade over the years. The weight of that responsibility settled across her shoulders as Rachel inserted the drive and began the decryption process. The files opened to reveal a meticulously organized archive: operation reports, financial records, personnel files, communications transcripts, 2 decades of black operations conducted outside official channels, beyond congressional oversight, without legal authorization. "My God," Rachel whispered as they scrolled through the documents. Political assassinations, election interference, arms deals with terrorist groups. Blackwood wasn't just running unauthorized operations. He was conducting shadow foreign policy. With high-level approval, Margaret noted, indicating signatures on authorization documents. Directors of intelligence agencies, military commanders, cabinet members. This would bring down administrations, destroy careers, maybe even trigger international incidents. Now we understand why Blackwood is willing to kill to keep it hidden, why he sent the Mamba unit to die in Kandahar. They continued through the files, focusing on those related to Kandahar, to Michael Winters, to the backup files they were seeking. A document near the end caught Margaret's attention. A personal journal Winters had kept, detailing his growing concerns about Nightshade, his decision to create an insurance policy, his plan for hiding the evidence. She read aloud the final entry: "Arhaz agreed to help, knows the risks, but believes, as I do, that some lines can't be crossed even in the name of national security. The complete archives will be secured at the location we've discussed. Only he knows the exact coordinates within the facility. I've created redundancy in case either of us is compromised. The coordinates are encoded in the one place Blackwood would never think to look, yet visible to anyone who knows where to seek them. May God forgive what I've done in Nightshade's name. History certainly won't." "The grave," Rachel said. "Callahan's grave, that's where Winters hid the coordinates. But what form would they take?" They studied the cemetery information Harrison had provided: layout maps, recent satellite imagery records of Robert Callahan's burial. The grave was located in the southeast quadrant, a simple plot with a standard headstone. Nothing in the official records indicated anything unusual about the site. "Wait," Rachel said, suddenly zooming in on the satellite image. "Look at the headstone design." Margaret leaned closer. The resolution wasn't perfect, but the stone appeared to have a decorative border of some kind, a pattern that might be significant to someone who knew what they were looking for. "We need to see it in person," she decided, "but we need to assume Blackwood has reached the same conclusion we have, that the cemetery is being watched." "So we watch the watchers first," Rachel said. "Identify Sentinel's surveillance positions, determine their patterns, then find a way to approach the grave undetected." Margaret nodded. "Standard counter-surveillance operation. Just like Prague." The reference brought a ghost of a smile to Rachel's face. Prague had been one of the Mamba unit's most successful missions, infiltrating a heavily guarded embassy to extract a defecting intelligence officer. They'd spent 3 days mapping security patterns before making their move. 3 days of patience, of meticulous observation, of planning for every contingency. They didn't have 3 days now. Blackwood would be moving quickly, bringing resources to bear, tightening the net around Boise and Blue Ridge Cemetery specifically. "We go tonight," Margaret decided. "Reconnaissance of the cemetery perimeter. Identify Sentinel positions. Evaluate approach options. And if the cemetery is too well guarded, if there's no safe approach, then we create a diversion. Draw their attention elsewhere while one of us accesses the grave." Rachel studied her friend's face, seeing the determination there, the unwavering focus that had made Cobra legendary even within their elite unit. Just like old times, she said softly. Almost. Margaret's expression softened momentarily. In the old times, we had 10 more sisters watching our backs. They're still with us, Rachel said, in everything we do, in every mission we complete, in every shot we take. And they'll be with us when we bring Blackwood down, when we expose Nightshade, when we finally get justice for Kandahar. Outside, the Idaho sun began its westward descent, shadows lengthening across Boise. Within hours, darkness would provide the cover they needed to begin reconnaissance of the cemetery, to take the first steps toward the key that would unlock the complete Nightshade archives, to move one step closer to ending their time as ghosts. Margaret checked her watch, calculated timing, began mental preparations for the night's operation. Part of her, the part trained for survival, for caution, for contingencies, whispered that this was too easy, that Blackwood would anticipate their moves, would be waiting, would have planned for every approach they might attempt. But another part, the part that had kept her in mind through Kandahar, through 3 years of hiding, through countless operations before that, reminded her that she wasn't just any operative. She was Cobra, one of the most lethal specialists ever produced by the American intelligence community. And now she had Viper at her side again, doubling their effectiveness, their lethalness, their chance of success. 2 ghosts against Blackwood's private army, against a man who'd built a career on eliminating problems permanently, against a system designed to operate in shadows and eliminate threats without trace. The odds weren't good. But ghosts didn't need good odds. They just needed to remain unseen until the moment they struck. And strike they would. For their fallen sisters. For Michael Winters. For themselves. For justice long delayed but finally within reach. Night fell over Boise. And in the darkness, 2 ghosts prepared to hunt. Some stories don't need definitive endings. Some battles continue long after the cameras stop rolling, fought in shadows by those who understand that true justice rarely makes headlines. We may never know if Margaret and Rachel found the key at Blue Ridge Cemetery, if they recovered the Nightshade files, if they brought Blackwood and his powerful allies to justice. Perhaps they succeeded. Perhaps they fell to Sentinel's forces that night. Or perhaps they're still out there, 2 ghosts moving through America's forgotten corners, carrying the truth that powerful men would kill to keep hidden. What matters is that they refuse to stay buried, refuse to let the deaths of their sisters fade into classified oblivion, refuse to accept that some secrets are too dangerous to expose. For the men and women who've worn the uniform, who've followed orders without question, who've carried burdens civilians will never understand. This story might feel uncomfortably familiar. The line between necessary secrecy and dangerous conspiracy has always been razor thin. If you've served, if you've lost brothers or sisters in conflicts that never made the evening news, if you've ever wondered about the real reasons behind the missions you were sent to complete, maybe you understand why some ghosts refuse to rest. And maybe, just maybe, there's a ghost watching over you too. Sleep well, America. And remember, not all heroes wear uniforms anymore. Some wear shadows. Some carry the truth. And some wait for the perfect moment to restore the balance that was lost. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more stories that explore the shadows of our nation's history, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Some tales need to be told, even when they're uncomfortable to hear.